Hello everybody, and welcome back. I hope you enjoyed my previous video about projecting Oppenheimer. This is part 2. It's taken a while, I've been a little busy, but now we're going to get to the Q&A section, so here goes. Oppenheimer is the longest and heaviest IMAX 70mm print so far, but what's the longest and heaviest 70mm you've handled? Something like Lawrence of Arabia comes to mind, but curious about your own experience. Lawrence of Arabia is a very long movie that is also on 70. I actually haven't run that myself yet. The longest one for me technically would be The Hateful Eight. I ran a copy of it with the Roadshow version, which is 7 minutes longer than Oppenheimer. Granted, I don't remember if that includes the intermission, which on the film version for changeover was not actually a bunch of black. If you were running a platter version, it was actually just more footage of black, so it's a toss-up between Oppenheimer and The Hateful Eight. They're both pretty long, but I enjoyed both of them. I'd love to hear about your maintenance methods for keeping the print clean and in a good state. Also, I'd be curious to see if you noticed any fidelity differences between the regular 65mm scenes and the 65mm IMAX scene, despite it all being cropped to 2.2:1 for the regular 70mm print. So, yes, keeping the print clean. In this particular case, at the top of the projector, I had 2 particle transfer rollers, so these green things. They're a little sticky and tacky, so they pick dirt off the film. If you have a dirty print to begin with, they don't do very much. They kind of just pick the dirt up and put it off somewhere else in the print. But if you keep it clean to begin with and wash the rollers after every print, they actually do a pretty good job at keeping dust off of the film while you're running it. You can make it better by putting a cover over the print at night when you're not running it. So there's something called a platter cover. It's a big piece of fabric, basically. It just covers up the whole print, keeps everything clean. But for me, in this particular case, it was very, very nice looking print with just the particle transfer rollers, and we did not have a cover. Now, regular 65 versus IMAX, yes, you can definitely tell a difference even on a 70mm not IMAX print. You can't see the aspect ratio get taller as you would with IMAX, but you can definitely tell that the IMAX footage has a finer grain to it than the normal 65mm 5-perf does. And that's just because even on 70mm projection, the grain of the print stock is way finer than anything you're going to get on a camera stock. So, yes, it's pretty obvious if you're looking for it, but if you're not, it's easy to miss it. Again, it's not like it's getting taller. I'd love to hear how you got into this line of work, what training you completed, and what you see for the future of film post-Oppenheimer. Do the economics now favor an expansion of the 70mm format? So I actually got into it at my college. I go to Worcester Polytechnic, and we have a student club that got started a long time ago, and we got started running film. So we've been doing that for about 60 years, and now that digital's around, we still do film, mostly for fun. At the moment, our digital projector is broken, so we're actually running all of our movies on film. So it is how I got into it. It's a really fun club. We do lots of cool stuff. We already talked with and have our service done with on our projectors by Boston Light and Sound, so I had a contact there. So that's kind of how I got into it. The economics of 70. I can't really speak to that, but I'll put my 2 cents into it. Even if we ignore the whole big shift that happened with COVID, where basically nobody went to movie theaters and it's been slowly ramping back up since, even pre-COVID, this would have been a very, very profitable movie. So I think should be some more 70 on the horizon. I really hope so, because I love film, so I would really appreciate seeing some more of it. Since I suspect the movie-going public takes projectionists for granted, would you care to elaborate and educate folks on what the stakes are, how their experience suffers if you don't do your job well? So there's a few things that can happen, which are not that obvious, and there's some things that can happen that are really obvious. So let's start with the obvious ones first. If the projectionists thread the projector wrong, you can damage the print. You can put a big scratch through it on either side of the film. If you do it on the base side, you'll have a black line, which is less distracting, but it's still annoying, especially if it's in the middle of the frame. And then if you do it on the other side, the emulsion side, you can get like a green line. If you've ever seen one of those, it's because something scratched the emulsion side of the film. So that's something that can happen if the projectionist doesn't do their job in a rather egregious way. You can also get something called a brain wrap. So if you misthread the platter, the projector will start pulling on the film, but the platter won't advance, and you'll get a bunch of film wrapped around the center head, and it will just jam, and all sorts of bad things will happen. really bad time, you usually burn a frame of the film, you'll see it on the screen, you'll melt away. That's the obvious one. The less obvious ones, sometimes the lighting is not automated, so the projectionists themselves will have to go over and push the light button. So maybe if they don't do their job quite right, they miss the timing, the lights will turn off either too early or too late, or they won't turn back on at the end of the movie. Those are the big ones. There's similar fine things, like if the sound switching is not automated, you'll have no sound. That can be pretty obvious, but that one, it varies quite a lot from place to place, as well as lighting. So, what do you do versus what is automatic, and has digital filmmaking changed your job? So again, I haven't been in this very long. I am a college student, and when film was still like actually how movies were played in movie theaters, I was nowhere near old enough to be working in them. So anyway, for what's manual versus what automatic, in this particular video where I showed you when I was running it, I pretty much had to thread it up and set it up before the movie started, and then once the film was rolling, it just kind of handled itself up until the very end, where I had to turn the lights back on and close the dowser on the projector. Now, when I'm at school, we don't do it with a platter. We have 2 projectors and we run changeover. So that is a bit more involved, either every 20 or 40 minutes, depending on the movie. You'll have to sync up a changeover from one projector to another, which is significantly more effort than just letting the platter run. It's pretty fun for me for changeover. Some people prefer the hands-off approach of platters, but if I have to be there, I'd rather have something to do rather than, sitting around. How would one pursue a career in this field? I'm going to be honest, I'm going to suggest you not do it unless you're really committed and have a good in. It's a very small field at this point in time. It's not like it used to be where everyone everywhere was running film, so it was pretty easy to get a job doing it. But these days it's a lot harder. So if you know someone in the industry, give them a call. That's a pretty good way to get into it, but if you don't, I'm really not going to recommend it. What differences are there in Oppenheimer's film to other reels? So the big thing here is that Oppenheimer was 100% photochemical for the film prints, which means there was no scanning onto a computer or printing out from a computer unless there was explicitly necessary for CGI, but as far as I know, they didn't do that in this movie. Anyway, what does that mean? It means that instead of what you'll see with pretty much any other film print these days, and what was pretty common for most of the early 2000s, which was they'd maybe shoot on film, but then scan it into a computer, edit it on a computer, and then print it out to film to project in a movie theater. What photochemical print making is a little different. You have the camera negative that you shot in your camera, gets developed, and then it does get scanned. They do need to make a digital copy of the movie after all. And then they do the edit in the computer, and it will make a cut list once they're done with the final edit. And then they will take that cut list that was generated by the editing software, and they will go and cut the original camera negative, cut and splice it, and then they will strike prints from that camera negative. Now, I'm glossing over some details here, particularly with the change from one format to another. If you have a 65mm 5-perf camera negative that you're blowing up to 70mm IMAX, or the other way around where it's 65mm IMAX to 70, it's very well documented other places, so I won't get too detailed. But that's what's pretty cool about Oppenheimer, is they did not actually use any digital intermediate between the camera negative and the film prints that you saw in a theater, which is super rare. It's super neat. You'll hear lots of different opinions about whether that's a good or a bad thing. I think that the colors look fantastic when you do them photochemically, but there's no reason that you can't also do that with a digital intermediate. But, I like analog stuff, so it's cool for me. Standards of quality control. So, the projectionists were not the first people to see the prints. You'd have both the lab and a separate facility inspecting them before they went to the theaters. They did still do a test run to make sure it all looked good, but they're not the first line of defense in terms of if the print is completely, totally goofed. Now, it is the projectionist's job to ensure a good movie-going experience. So, if there is a big sound issue, like the sound's out of sync, or it's out of focus, or it's not in frame, that's on the projectionist to resolve as quickly as possible to ensure that the audience is having a good movie-going experience. These are things that there are still problems that you can have with digital, except for maybe framing. You can still have it like misaligned with the screen, but these are things that we've come to expect to just be correct. It should be in focus, it should be in frame, the audio should be in sync. So it's on the projectionist to ensure that basic level of quality. Are you qualified and or do you repair the projectors if necessary? So I have a fun answer to this one because I am actually a service technician who also is a projectionist. So I can repair the machines if I need to. Most projectionists have some amount of troubleshooting and problem-solving ability. There is a upper limit to what you're expected to do, though, which is what technicians are for. Can any other movie film also play on an IMAX projector? Depends what you mean by film. If we're talking about the physical stuff, no, you cannot play any other format of film, as in 35 or standard 70mm through an IMAX projector and actually watch the movie. IMAX 70mm projectors are exclusively for playing IMAX 70mm film. Now, if we're talking about the concept of film as in like a movie, yes, there are other films that were printed onto IMAX print stock that will run through an IMAX film projector, even if they weren't shot on IMAX film cameras. If you watched a movie in IMAX in the early 2000s, then this is what happened if it wasn't an IMAX title. So there's all sorts of movies like animated titles that were, printed to 35 and then blown up to IMAX just to be on a bigger screen because it had to be on film because that was the only way you could project onto that IMAX screen. I noticed some warping and missed seconds of scenes during what I assumed were real transitions after cigarette burns. Could you explain the difficulties in that aspect of managing the film, or was my copy just dirty? So what it sounds like is you were at a place that was running changeover, which is pretty cool because there's not that many places still doing that. But what happens with changeover is at the end of every 40-minute reel, in the case of Oppenheimer, you switch from one projector to another projector. So there's a couple things that can happen that can make this go wrong. If you miss a cue, you'll either get tail from the outgoing reel or you'll get leader from the incoming reel. In either case, that should be black. If it's really bad, you'll hear some popping and clicking noises, but if you missed some film and you got black, it because somebody didn't quite hit the cue on time. If it was out of focus, if it's the first time, it's entirely possible they just hadn't set focus on the second projector yet. It's really not that hard to do, so they should have done a little better and fix that ahead of time. But anyway, yes, so changeover is more effort, and it can go wrong, and you have funky transitions like that. But if it's done right, it should be completely seamless and borderline invisible, unless you're looking for the cue dots, like the projectionist or me, just watching a movie. Hitting changeovers is not particularly difficult, just requires your attention, whereas a platter does not. But otherwise, it's pretty easy, and I actually prefer it because I have to be in the booth anyway, and changeovers give me something to do every 40 minutes, so it's not like I'm risking falling asleep or something. What made you want to be a projectionist, and what are some things you love about film? I really, really love the physicality of film. Being able to wind through a movie, stop at any point I want to, hold a picture in my hands that is literally a frame from the movie, and just look at it. I find that absolutely amazing. I love analog film photography for the same reason. You can literally hold the picture you just took, after you develop it, of course. But the physicality is amazing. I'm studying to be a mechanical engineer, so these beautiful film projectors that have this very fine, precise mechanical design and manufacturing is just so nice for someone who's interested in mechanical engineering. Does the film have accompanying instructions specific for that film? Like instructions on ensuring light levels are set at a certain point, or that light is adjusted during different parts of the film. So, yes, you will get an instruction packet if you're a projectionist for one of these movies, but they're not about adjusting things most of the time. Light levels are set at a certain point. Yes, that is actually a SMPTE standard, so all movies should be projected at a certain brightness, and by film projectors and digital projectors use this fun unit called foot Lamberts. So if you're using a film projector, it's, I believe, around 16 foot Lamberts in a normal movie theater, plus or minus 2. That is something that should never change, and that is also true within a movie. You set the lamp to the right brightness with nothing in the projector, you just run an open gate, and you should never need to adjust that during a movie, unless your lamp's going out, but at that point, that's not normal. Are you tired of watching Oppenheimer yet? And did you get to watch it early? So this is a great question. I am not tired of watching Oppenheimer for two reasons. One, I really like the movie, so it doesn't bother me that much. And two, I'm not actually watching the whole thing. I may be watching the projector and sitting next to it, and I would take the occasional glance out the window to make sure everything still looked good, but I was not sitting and watching the whole movie all day. That would get very exhausting. I also didn't have a fully functional booth monitor, so I couldn't hear that well, but I saw it, I think, about 25 times in a week. I did not get to watch it early. I actually did not start projecting the movie when it was released. I started a little later just to fill in a gap between some other projectionists. So I did not see it early, but if I started with the movie, I would have seen it early. Granted, being a projectionist is not a very good way to experience a film, so... You've probably seen it in 570 countless times. How would you compare to the 4K laser version, or 1570 if you've had the chance to watch it in that format too? I have luckily seen it in all three of these formats. 570, honestly, I think is kind of my favorite. It's got this beautiful, gorgeous, colorful, but not also overly saturated palette of like colors and tones, and it's nice and sharp. It looks gorgeous. My issue with 4K laser, now this depends on the machine. Some laser projectors are much better about it than others, but I have this hypersensitivity to the color fringing that you might see, where if you have white text on a black background or anything similarly high contrast, you'll see a different color on the top of the text compared to the black background as you will on the bottom. So particularly with a Barco SP4K, you'll see a red fringe on the top of the text and like a green one on the bottom, and that really annoys me. Additionally, I just don't quite love the way that laser projectors render colors. This is highly personal. Literally everyone will see a slightly different image from laser projectors. That's just how the monochromatic wavelengths work. But, you know, some people, it looks great to them. It is not my favorite. It's nice and sharp on 4K, and the contrast can be pretty good, but again, very personal. 1570, I did see it. I went to see it in the Providence, Rhode Island IMAX. It looked pretty darn good. I just had the issue of the screen was so big, I was darting my eyes around to focus on different parts of the screen instead of being able to see it all at once. So if I was looking at the middle of the screen, or if I was looking, you know, at somebody's eyes, the rest of the screen would kind of be blurred out because it's my peripheral vision. There also is a slight focus issue with our particular screening, where depending on what scene it was, you'd go from nice and sharp to blurry very quickly and not repeatably, which was weird. But I've heard lots of people who didn't have that issue, and maybe if I'd just been sitting a little further back so I could see the whole screen at once, I think that would be my favorite. Granted, I love IMAX 1570. It just wasn't my particular favorite for this movie. If it was Interstellar, 100%. So that's about it. I hope you all got answers to your questions. If I didn't cover what you were looking for, put a comment down below and I'll try to get to it on the next one. Speaking of the next one, in a couple months, and around mid-late February, we'll be running Oppenheimer here at Worcester Polytechnic, and that'll be 70mm changeover, so with any luck I'll make a video out of that one too, and to give you all a proper rundown on how a changeover style projection booth would work. So I hope you all enjoyed, and I look forward to seeing you all again next time. Bye bye for now.